Hello world, this is DM Ramos back again, and welcome to the Dungeons and 20s channel. And I am wanting to continue with the GM Story Engine and this series of using AI as a tool to better help you with your DMing skills and storytelling. So I made a lot of notes today because now we're moving on to the next section of this DM story engine, and this is dealing more with the two laws that I wrote about, focusing on the split party mindset, right? So these ideas, again, are not just from running games, but from writing, novel writing, TV shows, film structure, all that. I'm trying to pull into the idea. And I'm actually using AI as a tool to help me better write these ideas out and give me some structure to how I'm thinking and see all this in my brain. So I think that split parties is something that most DMs either will try to avoid or just have problems with, because I see so many YouTube videos on them and also discussions on Discord groups, and dealing with that idea of running multiple stories at once. So because when your party splits, be it across a city, a dungeon, or even different continents, you are no longer managing one story. You are managing multiple moving narratives at the same time. And you're not running a party anymore. You're sort of conducting what would be called more like an orchestra. Various different, let's say, instruments in an orchestra, people. Well, that's the same thing that you're doing for a game, an RPG game. And sometimes that starts to fall apart. And so what I've been writing with the story engine, it has a lot of different techniques. Things like planted investment, emergency jobs, rotation timing, spotlight economy, and even sandbox management, dealing with multiple story arcs. There is more than that, but those are all tools, and all of those tools fall under two main fundamental laws that I really thought about, and I was trying to make them into two laws because I didn't want so many rules or other laws. I wanted to make it simple. So the first law is the natural cut principle that you see here. And this is the one that everything else sits on top of. Players should never feel like you're managing time with this law. That should never feel like you're switching scenes. And it should feel like the story is just moving on its own. And I liken this to when we're in a movie, we know that the scene is changing. However, we're still immersed in it. So somehow we just don't really care and don't lose immersion even though the scenes are changing. We don't want to make it jarring. And some GMs also use timers. And that's fine, but timers should not be used like the actual command to change or switch scenes. So, when the timer goes off, we say, oh, all right, now we're switching. It breaks immersion immediately. So timer should just be basically used as an awareness tool. So you know that the time is already up, but it's giving you the indication to start looking. So in the scene where the scene naturally wants to shift, that's the spot that we should shift. The question gets raised, or a threat appears, a decision is about to happen. That's where you usually cut. So instead of players thinking, why did we just switch? They think, oh, we're going back to Thaddeus in the back of their mind. And also, I want to have a little bit of the mind shift here. It is true that in RPG games that the players are both the protagonist and the audience at the same time. We're sort of creating a story together with the DM, be it in Dungeons & Dragons or whatever other RPG games that you're playing. Though we never think about when the party splits, your players actually stop being players. And so this is where they actually do become the audience. They are no longer acting, they are watching. They have no agency in that moment of another player's scene. And that's the danger. That's where boredom can set in. And because they're not thinking, what do I do? They're thinking, when is my turn again? And that's where the job changes for us as game masters. Now, you're not just running a game. You are now, let's say, in a sense, directing attention. And it's the same thing as when we write books or TV and screenplays. We have to write those hooks. Just like TV shows and movies and novels, all those mediums understand one thing very clearly, right? They don't cut on resolution, they cut on tension. For, let's say, in the game, you finish searching the room. All right, we're going to go to the others. There's nothing there, no question, no tension. Players just disconnect. And let's say that in another scene, one lone player, you say you open the chest, and then you pause, and you say, and you hear something breathing behind you. And then you cut. So the players that are watching should be thinking, what's behind him? What was in the chest? Maybe is he dead? So that gives a little moment of engagement, even though they're not in the scene, because it raises a question. And so we have to get into mindset that we have to cut on mysteries and danger and sometimes decisions that are about to be made. You don't want to completely cut on, let's say, completed actions in certain situations, and we'll get more into that, or empty pauses or resolved moments. Because flat cuts create that boredom, and hooked cuts usually create an engagement. And the reason, once again, that this is happening is because now we're treating the players that are watching as the actual audience. This is the only time that we have to switch our mind frame on that. And I like to reiterate that because that's very important. So if this is happening and it's done right, two things happen. Active players don't feel interrupted. And inactive players stay curious. And that's what we're aiming for, is that curiosity. And that's the whole reason behind law number 1. And everything else falls under that umbrella. So now we have to move on to law number 2. And the engagement calibration principle, or just calibration. Law number 2, calibration. This is where all the tools I've been writing and working on currently fall under. And it's important to know that not all tables are going to need the same tools. Your job is not to use everything. Your job is to observe, test, calibrate. Everything I mentioned earlier, let's say planted investment, cross investment, emergency jobs, spotlight economy, and sandbox tools, they're not necessarily rules, they're diagnostic tools. They exist to solve specific problems. We have to calibrate and figure out which tables need what. We asked us questions, which I have them listed and working in this book. Do players disengage during split scenes because of these points of information that we have? Some players never get spotlight. The scenes feel unrelated to them. Step 2, apply one tool heavily for one session. And step 3, observe. Step 4, adjust. So as we move on to actually go over most of the tools that from now on we're going to be covering under law number 2 is the important thing that so player investment is important. It determines the success of how all this is going to go. So because all these rules work to a degree, but really the players at your table are the ones that are going to determine how all these affect them. We can have casual players and they just want to have fun and not really deep into the RP. And this actually determines the type of players that you as a DM are looking for and how you're going to implement these rules. But let's say that role players might be harder to keep engaged during spotlight shifts and split scenes, even with all the rules applied perfectly for these casual players. But tables that have that deeply invested role play, they will naturally stay invested. So the players pretty much the ones who care about like NPCs and their own fellow PCs, and that's important because you want them to be able to be immersed into the other fellow players' characters, and they usually are the ones that are staying in the game. They take the role play seriously, and it's their primary mode of fun. So those are the ones that these tools may actually work the best for. And also another important thing to understand too is that with some of these tools, players might be privy to information that normally they wouldn't be. Especially if they're an audience watching another player's scene where some sort of secret is being brought to light for that particular character's arc. And that will include the introduction for this part of the story engine. Give you a little bit of an idea still. Hopefully these tips or information is still a bit helpful. In the next videos I'm going to have is a series actually of videos going over the tools that are covered under the second law of this story engine for the specific split party rules. And thank you very much, and we'll see you for the next video.